Thanks very much. Well, look, thanks for those people that are here, and to those people out there in video land, we're really glad you could tune in. My name's Trevor Watts. I'm the local Member of Parliament here, and one of the things that's interested me when this whole session was proposed was home away from home, in terms of what does it mean to move your life from one place for another. I was very fortunate. I had the choice to move to Australia, and I chose Queensland and I chose Toowoomba, and I've been here for nearly 30 years. But we're going to go on a bit of an adventure, because different people have had different reasons to come, and I want to understand a little bit about those reasons, and then the pressures, and how life changed, and how you adapted to fit in. So we might start with you, Sharon, and really appreciate your time today, but just tell us a little bit about your journey here. We might go through the journey, and then we'll talk about what happened when you got here a little bit later. So where did you come from?
I come from a land so far away from here, a place called Botswana in the southern part of Africa. And I was born and raised in the village called Hebron in the southern part of Botswana. And, you know, growing up with the barest of necessities, as you can imagine, a young girl growing up in a village with my grandfather, looking our cattle, our livestock. I had names for those cows. I had names for those goats, and that was my life. No electricity. I had to walk to fetch some water. I had to walk 10 kilometers to and from school, my primary school. 98% of the people I went to primary school with have not gone ahead anywhere. Some are gone dead because of HIV and AIDS. Some are living in poverty. So sometimes I wonder, am I special? What made me to be different? We grew up in the same way. We ate the kind of same food in the same village. So the opportunities that were opened for me were exactly the same opportunities that were opened for them. I always look back and I think, you know what? It was all about letting my imagination run wild. It was always about reading of a life beyond what was existing around me. I found that through books. I was a reader. That's how I learned English. I read and read and read. We still do not have a library in the primary school that I attended. There is no library there. But back in those days, there used to be a truck that came every week full of books, and you can go in and get whatever book you want. I used to go for the thicker ones. The bigger, the better. I used to find books of Daniel Steele, and I was very young, and you can imagine what's in those books. If you read any of those books.
I haven't.
You haven't?
I haven't too.
You can only just imagine. They were made for adults, not really young people like myself. But I would circle little words in there, and I would use them in conversation. Book and reading allowed me to think of the world way beyond. Yeah. So that was my journey, where it started, in the little village.
Started in your mind? Yeah.
It started in my mind,
okay.
And seeing more of the world in my imagination. I'll tell you one little story. There used to be a plane that I would see passing by, and it used to be so far away up, right up. Because when they pass there, somehow they're probably at their highest altitude. So it looks like a bird, and I'll lie down under the tree and watch the sky and makes up all the, stories that I like to make. And I would see that plane and I would think, maybe one day, those people are going somewhere. Maybe one day that plane will take me somewhere.
It certainly has, and you can now go to Charlton and lay down, and you can see a lot of planes flying out of the Wagner Airport. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. So, Prudence, what about yourself? How did your story begin?
Well, my story began in Chad. So I was born in a pretty great family. My father was a politician. My mom had her own business. So my life was pretty good. But at the age of 4, war started. So my father was into politics, and, in Chad it's not so much of a democracy. And conflict among the politicians, and they wanted to get rid of him. So one day they came and they took my father away. So I was left with my mother. And at that point, our friends and our families and everybody has pretty much deserted us. And my mother made the decision that life in Chad was no longer safe for us, and it wasn't a place where her children would be able to have an opportunity to have access to education, to grow, to just live their lives freely. So she made that decision, and in the middle of the night, we left our country without telling anyone where we were going. And we left, we went to Cameroon, from Cameroon to Nigeria. After we stayed in Nigeria for a couple of months, my mom saw that Nigeria was also not a country that we would have opportunities as well. So she heard of a refugee camp in Benin, which is another country in Africa. So we heard that they had the UNHCR office right there. We made our way from Nigeria to the refugee camp, where we stayed outside for 2 months. So we were waiting to get approved as refugees, to have the refugee status. So you have to prove that you are actually living under the poverty line, your life is at risk. There's so many different requirements that you have to prove before you're finally accepted as refugees. So, after 2 months, we got accepted in the refugee camp. We moved and became refugees for 7 years before being accepted to Australia. So that's my story and how I came to Australia. I didn't know where Australia was because, at the time everyone knew where America was, and in the UK and Canada. So, we were all there holding out hope that one day we would be accepted to go to America. So we got rejected by America, by Canada, by the UK, and finally in 2007 we got accepted by Australia. We're like, where is Australia? But, we were just very excited that it was going to be somewhere where we could start our lives all over again. So.
All right. Thank you. Professor, your journey is a different journey. Where did you...
It is. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for being here with us, and hopefully it will be rewarding and informative. I was born in Bangladesh. When I was going to the school, in high school, I had to leave my father's home to my mother's side home, because that was closer to the good high school, and that was, two-way would be about 12 kilometers. So from 6 to 10, that's every day, rain and shine. That's what my educational journey started there. And then after high school, I went to the university, and at the university life, that's why I myself relate to some extent with the refugees. In 1978, the Burmese government at that time pushed the Rohingyas inside Bangladesh, southern Bangladesh, southeastern Bangladesh, and as a university student, I went to help them. I see firsthand, how life was for the refugees. Nothing. The clothes they're wearing, that's it. That's with them. There's nothing else there. And last year, I also went to the Cox's Bazar. Again, the Rohingyas up there, and it's a terrible situation. The med-ship camp, and this plastic sheet on the top, and the bottom is just a floor with soil and everything, shortage of water, sanitation. You know what happened in the refugee camp med-ship there. So these are the two occasions that I have seen myself. The other occasion I saw in 1971, when East Pakistan and West Pakistan was fighting, and East Pakistan was going to Bangladesh. That time, the military were in the cities, so everybody was trying to run away from the cities. And our closest big city was Khulna, and we are about 30 kilometers from that city. I saw men and women and everybody walking about 30 kilometers to come to the safety into the rural area where the military didn't have access at that time too. No, having said that, I was lucky to have good education, as I said, and I went to Canada for my PhD. I started teaching in the Dhaka University before going to Canada, but when I almost finishing my PhD degree in Canada, a friend of mine from Vancouver, I was in London, Ontario, between Detroit and Toronto, University of Western Ontario. A friend of mine from Vancouver, he rang me and said, in Australia, giving migration, if you want to apply, you should apply. That time, Canada would not allow international students to apply for migration. So I said to my wife, it's going to cost us $200 application fee. We better save that money, go back to Bangladesh and work in the University of Dhaka. She said, no, we would apply. And amazingly, many people applied at that time. Our application was granted within 3 months. That's a surprise. And other people took much more than 3 years, probably. And then nowadays, if you apply for migration for a spouse, you know how much it costs? $7,000. For a spouse visa application is $7,000. So compare that $200 for a 5-member family, and now one single. And he knows my sons and Trevor knows, and they are in business in the city, and one of them is doing this.
Tell them the business. It's okay.
Anyway, when I came to Sydney in 1993, after the migration, 92, sorry, I applied for jobs, and this is the third interview I had in University of Southern Queensland. University of Southern Queensland started a year before, just 92, because before it was University College of Southern Queensland. Before that was Darling Down Institute of Advanced Education. So I was in the second year when the university applied. And when I go back to Sydney, somebody rang me, when you can come and join the university. I had a few other interviews left to other universities at that time. My wife said, don't go for other interview. You got an offer. People are not getting any job. You got an offer, so just let's go there and see what it is. And it's she that who forced me to apply for migration to Australia, and she brought me to Toowoomba. So that's how I'm here. And I would say, I had a fair go as the Australian, values, one of the values, and I have done reasonably well in the education sector as a professor. Like last week, I was in Tokyo University. I gave a 3-day workshop there on math analysis, systematic review, and Tokyo University is one of the best universities in the world, probably. So I'm really thankful to this country for what opportunity they have offered to me. And I'm also a little bit of satisfied that I've been able to serve Australia as well in capacity as a professor, organizing international events and publishing in international journals, and promoting Toowoomba and Australia beyond this continent.
And I think that's been an outstanding contribution. But your sons and their shop in town, anybody who's been downtown and had one of the donuts dipped in chocolate, that's the professor's sons, and has a big contribution to Toowoomba and our waistline. So it's very, particularly mine. So look, for me, it's really interesting because people often will look and judge. The colour of the skin. People will go, "Oh, he's Australian," and obviously Australia these days looks very, very different from Australia of the past. And whilst my dad was Australian, my mum was English, and so. Just very briefly, my grandfather was actually a Jewish refugee many, many years ago from Eastern Europe to London. And so within 3 generations, here I am in Australia as a Member of Parliament. And the reason I say that is because particularly some of the refugee families that I meet here are very, very worried about their children and very, very worried about their grandchildren in terms of employment and economic opportunity as they try to build their home away from home. So what I'm interested in understanding now, and we might go back to the start, Sharon, and you arrive in Toowoomba. It's a strange land. You've caught the plane over. You're here. How did you feel? How did it cope? And at what point did it start to become home?
I arrived not in Toowoomba but in Melbourne when I first came to Australia. At 19 years old, full of dreams and those dreams that were implanted under the tree back in Hebron. I wanted to become a psychologist. So I had worked so hard so that I can get a scholarship which is what brought me to Australia. And I arrived at Melbourne Airport at, I think it was Valentine's Day. And in Botswana, and like many African countries, people don't show emotions or affections very publicly, just in case your parents might see or your uncle might see. People hide those things. So you can imagine arriving on a Valentine's Day and seeing people kissing each other and doing different things everywhere. And I felt so embarrassed for them. And I couldn't believe that was happening. And it's just a human nature that things happen. But for me, it was foreign. I was in a foreign land. And as we were driving to La Trobe University, to where we were staying, I was looking around and I was seeing a lot of cars parked on the streets. It was at nighttime. And lots of cars parked on the streets. And I'm thinking, people don't have cars parked in their houses. Why are people not having big fences? All the fences are just, some houses, there were not even any fence. There was just a house. And that's it. So that sense of, wow, if I just put my car over there when I'm at home, I might come back the next day and the wheels are off, or somebody has just taken whatever it is that they wanted to take. So the sense that, wow, I have arrived in a world that is different from my own. The next day we walked around to the Maya Center in the city. We were looking for things that are familiar to us, like bread and what we call polony, which is like a ham thing, salad thing. We didn't know what it's called here. And we were asking everybody, where can we didn't know where supermarkets were. So it was a group of us, about 4 of us. People thought we had long extensions, hair extensions like this, a lot of different colors, because we were told that we will never see any African salons. There were no African salons back then, so we had to come prepared with our hair. So people thought we were a music group from America or somewhere. So we were stopped in the streets as we were walking around Melbourne, people wanting to take pictures of us, people curious about what girl group we were. And we kind of started thinking, oh, maybe we are famous. Let's just go along with it. So in Melbourne at that time, it was very clear that we were different. It was very clear to other people that we were different. It was clear to us that we were different. We have arrived in an unknown land and culture. And finding our way through was a very interesting and difficult task. If you see an African person in a shopping center or anywhere, you ran over to them. This was 20 years ago, so there was not many of us. We ran over to them with, hi brother, hi sister. We hugged each other. That sense of familiarity. Oh my goodness, I can see someone who looks like me. We were drawn towards each other. But eventually, you start branching out, meeting people from different cultures. They start becoming your friends, your family, your lover. And you start to feel at home when people start to accept, and when you start bridging those divide, things that makes us different, and look at things that makes you all human beings, is when you start to feel like I belong here. It's been 20 years, and Australia is my home. And I feel it in my bones. And I can only imagine if anyone said to me, Sharon, you don't belong here, you go back to where you come from. I love my country, but I've chosen to make Australia home. I have a family here, I have my son here. I never, ever want him to ever feel like he has to choose. This is home. And we've made life here.
Well, that's great. For me, growing up in England, one of the problems I have when I'm here, particularly around the cricket and around the rugby, is even though I've always supported Australia, I'm told to go home. Get rid of me. They make me very much, we go, we don't want English here. Prudence, so tell us, you came here quite young.
Yeah.
So when did Australia start to feel like a home away from home, or in fact home?
Well, I came not 20 years ago, just 2007. So the time that I came here with my family, it was already a little bit different because they had a large number of Sudanese people here in Toowoomba, so they had a large number of even people from Congo and all of those things. And when we came here, I didn't know how to speak English. So the only word I knew in English was thank you, but I thought thank you meant hello. So I went everywhere thanking everyone, thinking that I was greeting them. But that was the biggest challenge that I had while coming to Australia, the fact that I didn't speak English. And even though I saw people that were Africans and people that I could directly connect with, most of the times we didn't speak the same language because the Sudanese people spoke Dinka or they spoke Arabic, and then others just spoke totally different language. So, you're in a place where you feel foreign, you feel like you just don't belong, and it's just a different place. You don't know the culture. Even I had to taste Vegemite, and everything was just different at that time for me. But then I got enrolled into school at Darling Heights State School, where I got enrolled into to do ESL, which is English as Second Language program. And from there, I started learning English, and I was able to understand and communicate with people a little bit better. In 2013, my mom made the decision that we were to go back to our country to visit. And I think she wanted to give us a good reminder of what our country was like, and for us to reconnect with our family members again so that we can come back and appreciate what we have in Australia and work hard and study hard to be better kids for her. So when we went back there, it was just so different for me because I felt that I grew in Australia and I was going to school in Australia, and just the lifestyle in Australia was not what I was used to. So going back home, I was more like a visitor because there was the people that were back there, I didn't remember them anymore. I didn't connect with them anymore. So I was literally counting down the days until I come back home, and home was Australia. And the last day that we spent in my country in 2013, I remember sitting there telling Mom, I can't wait to go home, I can't wait to go home. And when we got to the airport and came to Toowoomba, I was like, yes, I jumped on my bed and, it's home. So I think now, studying here at USQ and building my life here, my parents are all settled, my siblings and everything. I think this is home to me. Even if I go back to my country, I'll be more like a visitor. It wouldn't be a place that I see myself living for the rest of my life. I see myself in the future having kids and having a family and just building my life here. So that's when I felt more home, when I went back home, but it wasn't home, and I realized this is my home.
This is home, yeah. So, Professor, for yourself, your boys, I think one's born in Canada, one born in Australia.
Two in Bangladesh.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, when did home, both for you and maybe a little bit about them? What do you think as the second generation?
Yeah, well, for me, as an academic, I was part of the university, so I was fairly all right with my colleagues and the students. But then I had a sort of social and cultural life as well. So I was lucky to meet some of the people here, and I really appreciate them, particularly Father Brian Sparksman. He was a senior cleric in the Catholic Church. He was actually acting bishop when Morrison was sacked. But anyway, we became so close, friends with some of the clerics in the church group, that we could share almost everything. And even though we have different religion, but our viewpoints were quite common. And once Brian told me that the fact that we can communicate so openly and trust each other, that's a big thing that we have achieved. And supporting each other. And as you might know, that Toowoomba had a very small Muslim community. And when we were thinking to have a mosque, and I mentioned it to the ex-bishop, Bob Morrison, and he said, I'll help you. And Brian said, I'll look for a land for where you can build your mosque. I mean, you won't find this everywhere, and that happened in Toowoomba. So, I mean, that obviously give me the confidence that this is home. Outside the university, of course, is my staff and colleagues and everybody was always like a home there, working home. But this is like in the wider community that we got the recognition and acceptance and friendship and belongingness, and that's true. Sometimes I think like the place of birth is probably nothing to do with our choice. It's the God. If you believe in God, and he chooses where he wants to born, whether it's in Bosnia or Botswana or Chad or Bangladesh or Britain, wherever, or Australia. We have no contribution whatsoever. This is the choice of God. But where you die, or maybe you have a little bit of choice. And I think maybe I will die in Australia because I'm living in here. Most likely I will die in Australia. So this is going to be no longer home than the place where I was born and I lived for a few years as a kid and adolescent. So if you look at the long term and the number of years I lived, if you compare, Australia is probably the most longest time I have lived as an adult. The other thing I want to mention here, that I was somehow lucky to be able to work in Europe, North America, Australia, Middle East, South Asia, 9 different countries. The fact that I live in Australia now, it tells me that, and everybody else should realize that this is the place probably I chose for my career, for my family, and so on. As Trevor was saying about my sons, all of them went to Darling High School as primary kids, and then they went to St. Mary's Christian Brother College, three of them. So they had private school education here. I think that helped them to know a little bit more about the kids that they are coming from a similar background in terms of socioeconomic background and so on. And they are so happy to be here. I mean, they feel more Australian than I do, of course, because they can talk the Australian slangs and everything is more than I do. Even, thank you, tough or thank you, I learned it a bit late. One day I invited the teachers of my sons in our home for a dinner. And after dinner, when the teachers are leaving, one of them said, "Thank you for the tea." Part of the dinner was also tea, so I was shocked. We had so many other dishes, main dish and whatever. Thank for the tea only and whatever the other things. So that's the slang. I mean, tea. That's I learned later on. The tea means the dinner. So it's something that we learn always, and every place we go, there is something new to learn. Now, in terms of opportunities, I mean, 2 of my younger sons, they are in business here. They're not only doing business here, they're also international business. Just today, they have signed a contract with a shopping center in Brisbane to open their shop in Brisbane. So they're expanding their business beyond Toowoomba. Now, obviously, they love this country and they want to contribute. And they have employed, dozens of people, of this city. And the parliament members, the federal state, they know what they are doing for this economy. And I'm proud to be part of that family that will make. I think their biggest contribution yet to come. Because they have started, their entrepreneurship. The youngest son actually was finalist in the Young Entrepreneur of the Year last year. So I think they have a quite big future to contribute to this country and be proud of this country.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting. For me, I have 2 stepchildren, 2 children of my own, but when I came to Toowoomba, which is nearly 30 years ago, it was the place I chose. But it started to feel like home when I had children here. That was for me when I started to go, all right, this is my home. And it's interesting as the second generation, I think, is a really interesting puzzle where I can see, depending on how people arrive in Australia, there's particular stress around that. So, Sharon, I'm a little bit interested in some of the challenges for yourself when you first arrived into Toowoomba and what brought you here, but also maybe a little bit about your family and how do you make it feel home for them, and how do you preserve your heritage and your history and family traditions, but then plug that in and blend that to become an African Australian?
Yeah. I think the challenges for me were just being away from home and finding things out myself. You can imagine when, if you're still, under the parents' guidance, and your family, your uncles, your extended family are there, you can call them when you need. And as a teenager coming to Australia, I didn't have that anymore. I had myself and my few friends who I had just met, making decisions about what to do, how to do it, was quite challenging. And also recognizing that I was a little bit different. I was different. I came from a country where majority of people look like me, and to a place where I was a minority person.
How did you deal with that? How did that make you feel?
It was confronting, but it also represented an opportunity for me to expand my reach to many people as much as possible by telling them my story, who I am, and making friends from, I quickly realized that people here come from so many different other places. So their journeys to Australia are as diverse as themselves. And recognizing that as an incredible thing. Now, if I have a friend who has their home come from France, and I would love to visit France, then I could go and stay with their family. So I started thinking of the opportunities.
You're still thinking about that plane.
Going somewhere else. So thinking of the opportunities to kind of reach people and know people and having the connections across here in Australia, but connections with the broader world through them. And I think perhaps that's the kind of framework of living that I come from, where I'm always looking for the strengths rather than looking at the weaknesses or the challenges. I'm always looking at, if it's a challenge, that just gives me an opportunity to be innovative and to think of something else. So you don't dwell on those challenges. You look at it, you remove the barriers, and you thrive. That has been the way I have lived my life for 20 years here. When I finished my education, my master's, I was interested in autism spectrum disorders, in my master's by research at Bond University in Gold Coast. And again, that was about, I can do something to help people become more of who they are, rather than looking at the challenges. But in terms of connecting also to the wider community, I immediately got involved with the African community, the associations. From La Trobe University, I started the African Association there, was the chair of that association. When I came to Queensland, also got myself involved with a community group, the Queensland African Communities Council, and I became the chair of that, which is a peak body for the African communities here. And that was a way for me to continue to hold on to my roots and get what I love from this white Australian culture, mix it all up. Because I thought that I had something fabulous to share from where I come from, which is Botswana. We have the most incredible food, culture, everything. So thinking that, those beautiful things, by sharing them with others, people get to know me more. So by getting myself involved with the African community, we started the African Communities Festival. We did a whole lot of things that were about connecting people and getting us to come together, and so that we know each other better as people. Now, since I've had my son, who's 9 years old, he thinks he's 16, or he thinks he's 21, but he's 9 years old. I gave him the name Xavier Setso. So Xavier, meaning, a new home. Setso is culture. So through him, I see him and all of us, as this is a new home for my culture. And I believe it's not about me choosing one or the other. It's a simple, beautiful blend of both that makes me who I am.
Yeah.
And by ensuring that him growing up here and him feeling like he is just as valid and as beautiful as everybody else, and he can do whatever it is, and his color of his skin is no barrier, is very important to me. But also him recognizing his roots, that they are so deeply rooted, that are so deep in him. He knows where he comes from. You come to my home, you see it's like a gallery of Africa. And that's just who I am.
Oh, very good. Yeah, and I have one more question for you, and I'll pose the question to everybody. So, do you think of yourself as a African Australian, as a Australian African, or how do you think of yourself now after being here for 20 plus years and with the heritage and everything else?
I see myself as an African Australian.
Yeah.
Africa came first. Australia came second, but it's both.
Yep.
My son will tell you he's Australian with an African background.
Yep. Yep.
And that's absolutely defines who he is.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, African Australian.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe start there and then tell us a little bit more, Prudence.
Okay, so I think for me, how I keep my culture and my heritage is through my parents. My parents are they're strict, but in a way that it keeps me grounded. So we always attend church. We go to an African church where it's loud and there's dancing and it's just like you're in Africa again. Even through food, my mom always makes sure that, at home, there are days where we have to cook our traditional African meals. So we do a lot of things. We attend events and all of those things as well. I also started an organization which is called Erased, and it's about erasing racism through storytelling. So through that, I'm able to always surround myself with young people from different countries, and some from African backgrounds, Syrians, Afghanistans, and it's just a group of young people that come together, and they're also passionate about sharing stories and using their storytelling to bring awareness and understanding among young people. So through doing that, we're also exposed to other people's stories, other people's cultures, and that's how we learn, and that's how all of us young people make sure that we stay connected with each other's backgrounds and each other's stories and respect each other for who they are and where they come from. So I think, most of the decisions that I make is pretty much seeking advice from my parents, from mentors and all of these other people. I haven't been in a position where I had to make difficult decisions. So I'm just a young girl in Toowoomba living life and just trying enjoying living my best life.
And so for yourself, for someone who came here much younger than all of us, African Australian, Australian African, or? I
think for me it would be African Australian, just because of the fact that I at a very and I witnessed a lot of things along our journey out of Chad and all the way to being in a refugee camp and all of those things. My struggle and my struggles and my experiences and the hardship that I experienced that helped shape who I am today is from Africa. And I feel that if I had not gone through those things and experienced those things, I wouldn't be where I am today. And growing up in a country where young girls especially were not allowed to go to school, they were not allowed to speak. My country, when an older person speaks to you, whether they're right or wrong, you just have to respect their decisions. You're not allowed to talk back, respect your elders. If whatever it is, you don't really have a voice. And experiencing that from a very young age. I've always been a very talkative person. I've always, if I see something that I don't like, I like to stand up against it. I like to speak my mind. So I've always felt restricted in some ways growing up in Africa. So coming to Australia and realizing that I am allowed to have a voice. I am allowed to talk as much as I want. I am allowed to really stand up for something that I believe in. I was like, that's really what pushed me to even go and study law at USQ and you know, standing up and fighting for human rights and advocating all of those things. So I think that contributed to who I am today. So I will always be an African Australian. And I have little siblings that are like 9 and 2 years old, and they're just, when you ask them, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm Australian. So, you know,
Okay.
Yeah,
it's
very
fine.
much. Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I tell my problems and difficulties, I would ask you to just think for a moment about the refugees. I mean, what are their life? I mean, what they go through, what their life value at the point when they belong to no one, and they have no place to live, and they have no relative around. Sometimes we human beings are very sympathetic to the humanitarian causes, but sometimes some of us are not. I mean, those are not. I would ask them to put them in their shoes of the refugees for a while and think that what these people have experienced. And then you only value the importance of looking after their fellow human being. And sometimes, and Australia is very proud of supporting refugees and so on, but occasionally we see some people who stand up against the refugees. I think that's probably doesn't show the real face of Australia, the real concern of Australia, the Australia that we know of compassion and so on. Well, when I came here, obviously, I lived 6.5 years in Canada, which is, first time I had Western cultural exposure in Germany, in Europe, and second time in Canada. So I kind of knew the basic cultural differences in the Western society and the Asian societies.
Definitely warmer here.
Yeah. Definitely, it's diagonally opposite, but direction, location-wise, but much warmer and much closer to the weather in Bangladesh. And you can find the vegetables and fruits very similar to that grows in Bangladesh. And it's close at home. You can, if you want to go Bangladesh, then you go quickly. From here, then you can go home Canada. Like simple things like halal food, we have to go to Brisbane at that time. But now we have provided halal food facilities here. And there are restaurants as well as the beach shop and so on. So that's some of the things that we face. But we are friends. Like some of you might know Amol Bruce in TEF College now. She teaches English language. Many of the refugees probably go to TEF College for English and would know her. She's the one who first introduced us with the local Muslim community and halal food and gatherings and meeting and worshiping and so on. So that was easier for us to start with. Then university had a chaplain in the currently G block, and that we share with other people of other faith. So that gave us some going, but it was not sufficiently enough for what we are needed. Then we had created, the second year I was in the university, we created a USQ Multicultural Staff Network. This is to support the people who come from overseas in the university, as academic staff and general staff, professional staff, to support them and help them in the initial stage. I think this is very successful. Still, we have that. I'm the current chair of that network anyway. So this has done tremendous job, this network. Also, we supported a student of non-English speaking background. And we created association for them. So like the things that I went through that I thought problematic, I try to help people of my similar position who will be facing the similar situation, to help them so they can find their life a bit easier when they arrive here. And that worked pretty well for us. And the university, also benefited. And also now we are trying to do something through this network, what we call the international skills. Like we have, university has say academic staff from say 60, 70 countries. And they have enormous skill from overseas, which often not used. And university probably even doesn't know all of these skills. So we're trying to create a directory and so the university and the OED community can benefit. One of the things already benefited the OED community is we call the Register of Languages. That was created through that network. So it's, we have a list of the people who speak more than one languages and what languages they speak. And when somebody needs somebody in the hospital, translator or some document to be translated, this is going to be very helpful. So that network has been very helpful to the university as well as for the wider community. And then it comes to the activities and the cultural things. When I was in the initial university, give us, as I said, they would share the chaplaincy, but then we had a dedicated portable building. We used to organize the open day for the we call the Islamic Center. And people of all faith and no faith, they will come there and enjoy food together and have discussions, questions, mingling, and so on and so forth. This is going on. And the mosque, we will having another of this open day on the 27th of this month, which is Saturday. So I think all these interactions and all these contributions to the community make us feel that we are doing something for this country. And people appreciate us for that. And I remember that in 2014, when the Queensland Multicultural Affairs awarded me the Cultural Diversity Award, Ambassador Award, I thought that's a recognition for what we've been doing in this community. And I mean, I'm doing this for the sake of my family, my society, my community, and my country, but I get recognition. That's something bonus for me. I didn't expect that they will recognize me and give me an award. So this also, again, tells me that I'm well accepted here. People value me, my contribution. It's not what I look like, it's what I do, what I stand for. And I will stand for people of other faith, people of other culture, people of other ethnicity, and so on. Because at the end, if anybody got here, all of us, it will be the same blood. When me got here, it will be blood, but when you got, it will be something else. It will be the blood. And the emotion. If you hear a bad news, you feel sad. I feel sad. Everybody feels sad. If we hear a good news, everybody feels bad. So there's so much in common as humanity we are. And sometimes we forget that. We only concentrate on little differences that we have. But 99% of the things are common. But 1 or 2% maybe we differ. And some people just make benefit out of these differences by dividing nation. Now, for me, Trevor is a politician. For me, a politician should be someone who can take everybody on board, everybody in the country, every citizen in the country, give them opportunity, make their skill used for the country, and make the country better. If Trevor is going to exclude a section of the people, their contribution would be missing from the development of the country. And then you probably heard that quotation, I don't remember exactly what he said, that a nation is measured. A strength of a nation is measured by how it treats its weak section.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now I'll ask you the question and I'll answer it myself. Do you consider yourself an Australian Bangladeshi or a Bangladeshi Australian?
Obviously I was born in Bangladesh, so as a Bangladeshi Australian. Yeah. But as I said, I was born in there, I probably would die in here. So
you're in transition.
Exactly. So yeah. And if you take me, I think I did more for Australia. I earned more money in Australia. I paid more tax in Australia.
Yeah. Well, we're very happy for the tax.
Exactly. Tax that's count at the end. Yeah.
Now, well, so for myself, I was brought up in England for 17 years, but my dad was Australian. So when I was little, he used to take me to watch the cricket. And if I looked like I could be happy that Ian Botham hit Dennis Lilly's ball over the fence, he would hit me around the back of the head. So around cricket and around rugby, I was always brought up to very much be Australian. Around the Olympics, I was Australian. But around football, soccer, I was English. Yeah. And then when I came to Australia, and I'd been here for some time, there was a game going to be held in London between Australia and England, and I really didn't know who I was going to support. I was like, who am I going to support? You know, like where's my loyalty lie, sort of thing. And what was really interesting is when the two team sheets came up, I hardly knew any of the English players, but I knew all of the Australian players. And I sort of said to myself, well, there it is. You know, like I am now Australian. Yeah. So it's funny the things that make you think about it. Now when I go back to the UK to visit Mum, it feels like a place that I know well, but it doesn't feel like home. You know, things have changed, things are different. And I mean, I grew up in East London and Essex, which is a very multicultural society. So, you know, I played in South London on a all black basketball team. I was the only white guy, and they didn't like it. They didn't want a white guy on their team, you know, because Brixton was pretty proud of its heritage of being, you know, mainly West Indian. And I lived in Hong Kong for a period of time, and I played on an all Chinese basketball team, and they were the ones who taught me acceptance, because I had grown up in quite a racist environment where everybody would look for the differences and they would club together, and it was quite uncomfortable in the 80s in that part of England. And when I got to Hong Kong, even though I was the outsider, I was, you know, completely different looking, different language, different culture, different history, everything was different. They treated me like I was their guest every day for 4 years, and it taught me a lot about how you should treat people with differences. And they were proud to show me their culture, and they were proud to include me in their culture so that I could learn and understand. So I just want to talk very briefly, and we've only got a couple of minutes, so it'll just for each one of you to answer. How can we do better as a community here in Toowoomba, but as a nation, to make sure we don't put mental stress and pressure on newly arrived people, that we help them, that we include them in our community? What sort of things, in your experience, should we be doing, and how well are we doing? So I might start, because time is running out of us.
Yeah, well, how we treat with people depends on how we understand their life and their sufferings and what they have gone through. If you're a human being, we should feel for their pain, because we might have been going through the same thing. We are lucky that we are not, but some people have done that. And to that extent, I want to mention here that some of the countries in the world, we know they are pretty rich and they never wanted to be refugee. Countries like Iraq, like Syria, like Libya. They came for education, this student, and they went back after their degree, never thought about settling outside their country. But because of what happened, you know that the bombs and murder and war and fighting, those places are no more livable. So what is the choice they have? They have to flee their country, go somewhere. And people who are responsible for destroying their country, if they don't have any empathy for them and any sympathy for them and don't care for them, this is a big, lack of responsibility, I would say, and that's a disaster that we are facing. If we can help with stopping, like many of the diseases that used to kill many people, we have now vaccination against them. So the vaccination helped them, human being, not to get those diseases. The war machine is a disease, and it has been destroying so many people's life, poor and rich and everywhere else. If there is any vaccination against this war machine, that would be really, really helpful. So the policymaker, politician, how much money is going for this weapon industry, and how much money they're giving weapon to the both sides of the fight and making money out of it. This is immoral. This is killing the humanity. And if you look at the First World War, Second World War, how many millions of people were killed? And the gun industry benefited out of it. And I mean, we are all here, some of our are refugees, some of us are not. But at the end, we will all suffer for this industry that is destroying the humanity and the values and so on and so forth. If we invest a part of that money for healthcare, education, settling the refugees, and then we don't have to have that. I want to add with this, Canada has a policy that's a collaboration between the community and the government for supporting the refugees. So that like the community will sponsor refugees. They will provide temporary shelter. They will take them shopping and all sorts of things. And the government will support in terms of some finance.
Now, I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to hear from the others
thank
too.
you.
So empathy and support is really what you're saying.
Exactly, and try to prevent the things that is creating the refugees. Because if you keep creating refugees and then try to support them, this is hypocritic.
Yeah.
You have to stop creating them in the first place.
So Sharon, what do you think we should be doing? You've come here as a young lady and you've made it home. What should we be doing to help other people make Toowoomba home?
I think we need to be open-minded, to hear people's stories. When you see me, don't just see me as a black woman coming through to you, saying, oh, I see that woman. Hi, my name is Messi. What's your name? My name is Sharon. And then let's have a conversation. You cannot imagine the power of connections by talking to people when you are just walking down the street. As I was looking for parking today at Anand Street, the other side, I met a lady who was passing by, and I said, "Oh, are you leaving?" And she says, "No, I'm just parked the other side." I said to her, I said, "Okay, I'm looking for parking." You know, just that saying hello to her, we ended up having a most beautiful conversation, and that is connection without any intention. Let's do more of that.
Yeah, right, that's nice. Prudence.
Yeah, I believe in the power of storytelling. I think through storytelling we're building mutual understanding among people. So it's definitely really important to hear the stories, and also it's important to realize that refugees are more than just storytellers. They're not just here to tell their stories and that's it. They've got so much more to contribute, whether it's through their skills, their voices. They're more than storytellers, and that's how we can best support them.
Yeah, well, that's great. And look, I really appreciate you guys putting yourselves out here and sharing a little bit of your stories and helping people understand the different experiences and what we might be able to do to help it, particularly in this mental health week. You know, the last thing we want is for people who have come from very challenging backgrounds to suffer more because they don't feel comfortable in the community. So really appreciate your time. I'd ask the people who are here if you could just join with me in thanking the guys for their time and opportunity today. So now, we were supposed to ask some questions, and I think we might have missed that bit. Sorry, it's two interesting stories. So hopefully if people do have any questions, maybe you can just get a one-on-one briefly and ask your questions. That's right, time's up on us. Okay, so if everybody's got time, we can ask a few questions. So does anybody have a burning question out there?
I guess for the three of you, Aussie born and raised, I guess we know our culture, we think we know our culture, but what was your first impression of that Aussie culture? You know, how would you sum it up in a couple of words? I guess we say we're, laid back and relaxed, but
I was
for
like,
you,
whoa, they're crazy.
I was like, there's no kangaroos everywhere. This is Australia. All I had seen was Skippy the kangaroo, and I thought everyone has kangaroos everywhere. And it wasn't like that.
What about you, Professor?
Well, as I said, I've lived in the Western country for a while before I came here, so it was not that shocking. But when I come for the interview at USQ, one of the panel members were wearing short and interviewed me. I didn't quite expect that.
Well, yours is similar to mine. So when I first arrived in Queensland, I went to my very first political function back in '89, and it said semi-formal. And I arrived, I'd been to Australia plenty of times before to visit Dad, but this was when I'd come to live, and it said semi-formal. And I arrived and there was a songs on, and I thought, well, what does casual look like?
A funny story, right? When we first came, we had a family that invited us to an event, and they told us to bring a plate, right? So we didn't realize you have to have food in your plate and bring it. So we rocked up there with our plate, and yeah, it was kind of awkward. So then we learned that when they say bring a plate, you're supposed to bring something to share.
All right, so tip for anybody watching this online is if you're inviting someone from a foreign culture
Explain
to come
them,
round.
bring a plate means bring a plate with food in it.
There's another thing that I was not expecting. Like in the culture that I grew up, if you invite somebody, it doesn't matter if the home or restaurant, you pay for the guest.
Yes.
But in this country, they send you your card, they invited to a dinner, and it's $80 in the bottom for a person. That is quite new. I mean, that's different than what we used to experience. Yeah.
Is there another question out there? Yeah.
Hi. I totally agree with the last question. Was what can we do more in Toowoomba? And I was just wondering, because belonging and connection is definitely the core of what will see refugees thriving in Toowoomba. I just wondered if you had any like really practical things that you think Toowoomba has gaps in to see our refugees thriving here in Toowoomba.
I think in Toowoomba, employment, there's such a big gap. There's a lot of people that can't seem to find jobs in Toowoomba here. And I think Mr. Politician, got to start working on it.
No, well, long before I got elected, I used to do a program with Mercy Services, trying to help people. And so, it's critical. And certainly I know for a lot of the older generation, they're very worried about the young people finding an employment. And for me, employment is more than just having the self-respect of earning your own money. It's actually a social connection, meeting people, daily interaction. There's so much more than just earn an income. So
can I just add with regards to employment to say we also have to look at entrepreneurship and really look at opportunities to teach about starting your own business. People are already resourceful. You know, if you're able to leave your country and you know, save your family from harm and make it all the way to Australia, you have already strategies in place to get somewhere if you employ those strategies. So looking at supporting people to start their own businesses and thrive in their businesses and looking at their strengths as well is something that we're often forgetting when we're talking about employment. We think that just go and get hired somewhere.
Totally believe in the individual, you know, making the contribution, and small business is certainly something I think we should be supporting. So, is there? Oh, sorry.
I think the community. First of all, I think I should thank the Toowoomba Regional Council and the politicians for making Toowoomba a refugee-friendly city, and it has been successful. Even Peter Dutton, when he came here, he praised Toowoomba as a model. And from my experience living this country, this city for a long time, I can see the leaders, doesn't matter if they're a cultural leader or political leader, religious leader, education leader, they are all united to live in peace and harmony. That's great. And that's what the strength of Toowoomba. I think outside Toowoomba, people in Australia, they realize that Toowoomba has something special. Because we are not fighting each other. We are trying to complement each other, work together. And that's where the strength is. And that's, if this can be to the fellow mates, I think it has worked, if not great extent, but to a reasonable extent. I can see the colored people, and when I came here, there was no colored people other than us. And my wife was the only woman putting on the head covering. But now we can see a lot of them on the street. I can see the people of different color in the suburb that I live in and other people live in. And they are living in peace, they're doing as good. So, I mean, this will be normal over time. It's already close to normal, but when people get used to, then people will say this is nothing out of ordinary. This is normal.
Well, it's a challenge for me because I have to realise as an ex-basketballer and a basketball coach that not every Sudanese tall boy plays basketball. And but I usually ask them just in case. But look, if everybody can just join with me in thanking our guests here today.